Hi, I'm Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife and host for Stories in a Cemetery. You can find all my fiction works with themes of the afterlife on nicholasmcgurr.com. That's NicholasMcGirr.com. As a writer, I do research, and that research is more than likely inside a haunted location or a cemetery. Like you, I'm curious about the afterlife, and always looking for a new topic for my next book. I hope you enjoy this episode of my research as much as I did in using it for my fiction works. Let's get into today's story in the cemetery. Hey guys, welcome to episode 20. We are into the new year already, and I've just been so busy with Stories in the Cemetery tours over the past couple of weeks. I'm actually glad to be back with the microphone in front of me and talking about some of my research and ghost stories around Charleston. And this week we're going to discuss the Julia Legare tomb, where I've actually visited. But for those of you that don't know, at night I am an interactive ghost hunting guide through the streets of downtown Charleston. It has the same name, so if you're a local, just look up Stories in a Cemetery, and we actually have some great deals right now through Groupon. Again, just type in Stories in a Cemetery and those deals will come up for you. I'd love to take you ghost hunting on the streets of Charleston. So to my knowledge, I'm the only tour guide in downtown Charleston that will take you on the streets with actual equipment as we kind of look into some of the paranormal stories. There's my pitch for my tours. So I want to thank all the listeners from episode 19 that were able to head over to Buy Me a Coffee, where we discussed Byron Price's Secret with Brian McFarland. Brian is a historian right here in Charleston, and he and I are on the search for the secret here in Charleston. Remember, you can support the show by heading over to Buy Me a Coffee and dropping $1 in the coffee pot. For that support, you'll be able to access episode 19 and all future episodes. So it's not like you're paying $1 per episode, just throw $1 in there and it's bonus content for Stories in a Cemetery. You can also rest assured that I drink pretty cheap coffee and that your dollar will actually probably buy me 3 coffees. I'm a budget coffee drinker because I do drink so much of it. As for next month, we're going to be discussing verse 5 evidence with the Montreal painting, just because I have a strong belief that verse 5 is for the Charleston painting. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, go back and listen to episode 16, and you'll know exactly what I'm speaking about. Again, those will come out the first Friday of every month, and that's the schedule that we're going to keep. So whether or not I go dark with the normal episodes has yet to be seen. This past, for the January episode, it's obviously holiday time, so I took a little break. And again, I was really busy with the tours. So we are back. But I do want to give one big shout out to the Comics Section podcast. Every once in a while, I come across a podcast that I absolutely love and cannot wait for the next episode. And for this particular podcast called the Comics Section, they cover all the news, reviews, and opinions of any new movie trailers, fandoms that are on TV, streaming devices, and the technology behind it, as well as all the new comics. Guys, you need to give them a listen. It's for all of us nerds out there. So if you're into ghosts, I'm guessing you're somewhat of a nerd like me, and you like to hear about all the newest stuff with the fandoms and the movies and those kind of things. You know, the pair that covers everything, like, they do an excellent job. They're out there in the field just like me, and I commend them. So great job to the Comic Section. Give them a listen. They are out every single Monday. Last housekeeping note before we get into our story, don't forget you can leave me a 5-star rating or a comment on the following podcatchers. That'd be Apple Podcasts, and thank you for those that have been leaving me some reviews. Stitcher, Castbox, and on my host of Anchor. If you leave me a voice message on Anchor with an actual ghost story, I will feature it right here on the show when I'm doing all of my housekeeping stuff. So guys, today we're going to dive right in. We are talking about the Julia Legare tomb, and that is in Edisto Island. So to look at the name, I always kind of like to pronounce things properly. As most of you know, I'm an English guy, so I have to have my enunciation proper. And what I noticed was that it is not pronounced Legare, as it looks on the title of the podcast and on my blog, but it is actually pronounced Legare. According to an article I found, that particular author wanted to make sure that the enunciation and pronunciation was correct. So what's interesting about this particular investigation was that, believe it or not, even though the title of this podcast is Stories in a Cemetery, most hauntings and paranormal evidence does not really show up in a cemetery. I mean, if you really think about it, who wants to hang out where they're actually buried, in the afterlife? That's a question I've always raised. But this one in particular, because it's a tomb, is obviously in a cemetery in Edisto Island at the Presbyterian Church. If you head over to the blog, you can actually check out the map. I usually give the exact location of where my investigations happen. So the cool thing about Julia Legree's tomb is that it's a story well told around Charleston, and no matter which ghost story you have or somebody that's into the paranormal, they usually know this tale. And I'm sure that it's got a grapevine effect to it, where all of the facts and all of the things that are behind it are a little construed, and there are other websites out there that have tried to debunk the story, have tried to take a ghost story and make it a little bit more real by putting some facts and some data behind it. That's really not what I'm about with this particular investigation. What I was after was, do I have any evidence from my tools? So I had my spirit box, I had my EMF detector, and what else did I have? Obviously some photos. We took some video. But that was pretty much about it. It was just me and April, my wife, and we were just kind of hanging out in this cemetery, and it's absolutely stunning. I don't even have words for it. The monuments and the headstones that are there have such a high craftsman work to it. Like, check out the pictures on the blog. Obviously, I can't post them here on a podcast because you're listening. But link back and go check out the blog. The pictures were just gorgeous. And I did do a little bit of cleaning them up so they were a little bit more clear. But again, just absolutely gorgeous there. And it's peaceful. I can't even explain to you how peaceful it is. There was another couple walking around, taking pictures, kind of looking into the tomb just like me. We didn't speak to them directly about what they were doing, but they did happen to ask if I was okay walking around inside the tomb. And April just looked at him and said, this is what he does, so just kind of let him be. But it's off a main road, but the story is very simple. The tomb doesn't have a door on it, nor does it have a gate. The story is that Julia Legree was sick with diphtheria, and the local doctor at the time, this would have been the mid-1800s, pronounced her dead. And because they didn't do the whole embalming fluid and the preservation of a body during that time period, she had an immediate funeral, and she was placed in her husband's family tomb with Legree. Now, Julia's maiden name is Seabrook, which most people don't know that. But the door is removed because, well, let me take a step back. When they went to bury the next family member in the tomb, they found Julia's body by the door with scratch marks on the back of the door and throughout the tomb because she was in a coma, even though she was pronounced dead. The door, once they replaced her body and put in the new family member that has passed away, they shut the door, but the door would open at different periods of time. The groundskeepers would find that the door was open constantly, so they finally removed the door. It is also said, with those scratch marks, that the door was made of marble. That's where I kind of have a little bit of a stretch, because I can't see where a weakened person who is ill with diphtheria has enough strength to put scratch marks in marble. I don't think somebody in perfect health with massive strength could put scratch marks in marble. That is my opinion, and I'm going to go with it. But to keep the ghost tale exactly that, a ghost tale, we are going to kind of not debunk all of this, but we are going to look further inside the tomb as we move along through this story. Now, there's a great article. If you want to know how somebody else tried to debunk all of this, the person's name is Jamie Rubio, and you can find their article, Stories of the Forgotten, The True Legend of Julia Legare, Fact versus Fiction. I'll put a link in the show notes. Great article, great historical work. I commend Jamie. They did a great job with coming up with all of the data and facts that would make sense with this particular ghost story. But Rubio is actually asking for fact to try to debunk all of this story to see if any of it is actually true. Now, the only thing I'm going to come up with as far as debunking on my end is whether or not, like, I guess the question is how exactly was the tomb set up at the time? Now, walking around inside the tomb, it's pretty bare. Like, there's a cement slab with like a cutout that would look like where you would lift it, and there's almost looks like a cement pillow at the head of that, and then there's 3 headstones. So guys, at this point we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back to talk about my evidence that came through, as well as what my thoughts are on how this all went down. And we're back. Thanks, guys, for allowing me to put sponsors in the middle of the show. It definitely moves things along. So we were talking about Julia Legare's tomb and kind of my speculation while I was there and some of the evidence that I was able to capture. But there's a few things else with this story that I wanted to point out. Because it is in a grapevine effect, there are 2 different versions of the story about Julia's age. Some of them say that she was a child, and others say that she was an adult around the age of 22 or 23. I'm going to go with the 22 or 23. I did happen to find a picture, and the picture of Julia, it actually is a miniature portrait of Julia, and she is obviously well in her 20s. I will put a link to that in the show notes. It'll actually be a link back to my blog post, so that way you can see the miniature picture. So you could see that she is well in her 20s, so we'll kind of debunk the whole she was a child and tried to scratch her way out type of ghost story. Let's see, the other piece, while I was inside, I had the EMF detector running. What was really cool about that was I got small spikes, like into the orange and yellow portion of it, so it went from green up to orange, and I was not able to recreate the exact same, so it wasn't that anything was influencing it nearby. I was inside the tomb. A lot of times it was, when it would occur, it was hovering above the cement slab in the middle of the tomb, and it only happened at random times. So it wasn't that it had an interval to it where it was something man-made influencing the EMF detector, which was super cool. I did ask a few questions. Please prove that you're here. Make this go up to orange. Nothing ever happened. It kind of happened all on its own. But I will tell you that we walked in and out of the tomb twice, and after the first time that I walked out, the Spirit Box app actually gave me the term "come back." All the other words I kind of debunked as bogus. As we all know, as I've talked about in the past, this app is meant to be a hoax in a game. And I will tell you that as of recently, too, I did actually buy the full version of it. It originally, I believe it had 1,900 words for the free version, and now I have over 9,000 words in the vocabulary of the app, to where it actually gives us a little bit more concrete evidence. I do use the app on my tours, and it has given us more than substantial evidence, even using the free version. So that app is called Ghost Detector. I am by no means a sponsor for this particular app, but it is one of the tools that I use and keep open when I'm investigating a new location. So the term "come back," I kind of took that as she wants people to come investigate. She wants to be known. She wants to be heard. However, I didn't hear anything else. I had a couple like odd names come through, and I didn't find any connection when I was researching the Legares or the Seabrooks, and just really no evidence of any other terms connecting besides "come back," which to me was a direction after I had already left the tomb. I did go through and walk through the entire cemetery looking for any other paranormal evidence. The only EMF spike that I had was inside the tomb. So take that for what it's worth. It is what it is. The other couple that was wandering the grounds was not near us. There's nothing else around the tomb that could influence it. Not to mention, I was inside a tomb. How is anything going to influence it? My phone was, I keep everything separated so I can gauge how far away I need to keep my phone so it's not influencing the EMF detector. And I didn't hear anything on the audio either when it came to any kind of disembodied voices or anything coming through. My speculation on some of this story, I guess, is when you're walking in and you see the slab and you see that like that cement pillow at the top of it, it kind of looks like a bed with a pillow on it. That's why I'm referring to it that way. The only thing I can come up with is that maybe there was a sarcophagus, which is kind of a cement crypt or tomb, or however you want to look at it, inside the tomb, that would have been in the center of it, and then family members would be buried below it underneath the cement slab. The cement slab is cracked at this point, so that kind of tells me there was some weight on it or somebody was in there destructing it, but it does look like it's been somewhat repaired. Underneath this tomb is where I think the rest of the family would be buried, because they cannot be buried inside the walls because they aren't deep enough. I would say that they're probably maybe 10 to 12 inches thick, and obviously that's not enough room for a body to be buried or for another casket to be placed. So my thought process is that she was in a sarcophagus, which would have been a cement coffin above ground on top of that slab, and at the pillow end of that slab, of the bed that I was speaking of, would be kind of like a stepping stone to be able to remove or place the lid on top of the sarcophagus. And that's just my theory. And if there was any inclination that Julia freed herself from that, or destroyed the cement sarcophagus in any way, it's highly unlikely. The other piece of this is if that the sarcophagus never existed and Julia was buried underneath the slab, it's also highly unlikely that she actually made it through a cement slab, which I'm guessing is at least 6 to 8 inches thick. I don't know of any human strength, let alone somebody that was weakened through diphtheria, that would have been able to make it through there. Now, I don't know how this was originally set up. I'm not going to pretend that I do. However, it does raise some questions, and I can see where Jamie Rubio's article comes in handy. You want to kind of debunk a ghost story, but I'm one of those guys that just loves a good ghost story. Just like the tales that you guys tell me, it's the same principle. It's a ghost story. And I even kind of give a little glimmer of this for my guests that are on my tours. Like, hey, you should head down to Edisto Island. It's about a 40-minute drive from here if you really want to see a gorgeous cemetery and check out another ghost story on your own. And I kind of give them where it's at. But at the same token, this is a ghost tale. It's a great ghost story. Woman buried alive, tries to scratch her way out. Who doesn't love those kind of stories? That's why we watch horror movies. That's why we watch, some of the stuff that we watch in the podcasts that we listen to, of those other great horror story type podcasts. That's why you're listening to me. It's a ghost story. Now, I did get a paranormal EMF spike. I can't say whether or not it was Julia or another family member or somebody else from another grave, but I did get the term come back. So I kind of take that as, it's got some activity to it. Now, would I love to do a full investigation of this? I would. I would love to take a few friends of mine with all of my equipment, and everybody has their own piece, and look for cold spots and get the thermal cameras going and kind of take a look around. But I don't want to disturb anything. I really don't, because what I feel like when I was there, as peaceful as it was, I didn't feel like it was an eerie or spooky feeling, creepy, none of that. Now, it might be at night, but at the same token, that's kind of like what I live for, right? That's why you listen to me. You love to hear where I've been. I may do a full investigation on this later with one or two friends and see how it goes. With that being said, guys, this is just a ghost story, to my knowledge. There is a little bit of paranormal activity there. Go visit. Go see for yourself. Pull out an EMF detector app on your phone. They do work. They're not always completely accurate, but you will get some spikes from time to time. The artist work is obviously well worth the trip to go down and see for yourself. The craftsmanship that's in the gates, that's on the monuments, the cemetery, the tomb itself. It's a different type of life down there in Edisto Island. It's, like I said, I hate to say suburb of Charleston, because we don't really have full suburbs, but it's gorgeous. Go check it out for yourself. Check out Jamie Rubio's article if you really want to fully debunk this. And I also put a video up of my EMF detection. and that way you can see where I was at. It's pretty plain in sight. The video is 30 seconds long, but it gives enough of the spike on the K2 that you can see that there is definitely some paranormal activity happening there. I also feel like there's some secrets here that are trying to be kept by the Legare family. With Rubio's research, they were unable to find anything that talked about Julia's death, which tells me that the family wants to keep it a secret. If you remember my Hatcher Cemetery episode, I can't remember, I think that's episode 2, you'll know that I don't like to reveal any family secrets if I come across them. As a writer and researcher, it's kind of against my own personal code to reveal those kind of things, and I don't want to do that. Right now, I have a great ghost story in my pocket where, I took pictures of a beautiful tomb. I was able to walk inside of a tomb, which was a first for me. I've never actually done that before, but walked right in, and it's really cool. I got some activity. I may do a full investigation later and update this blog and podcast. Who knows? But for now, check out the pictures on my website, guys. And I can't thank you enough again for heading over to buymeacoffee.com to check out my episodes on The Secret. Those are bonus episodes that will stay on there only. And we are getting closer and closer to getting the permission to actually do a soil probe where we think the location is for the secret cask that Byron Price has buried. But guys, this has been Stories in a Cemetery. Leave me all your reviews. Tell me some ghost stories. You guys know the drill. I will talk to you guys next Friday. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for listening to today's Story in a Cemetery. Be sure to check out the show notes with pictures and bonus audio sections on nicholasmcgurr.com. As you know, I'm a writer, and now you have another story that inspires me to write my fiction works. Be sure to share this episode on your social media or leave me comments on the Stories in a Cemetery Facebook page. I'll see you next time with another Story in the Cemetery.